Right, so hey, we will start with a karakia, but just before then, we do have apologies from Marcus Gower, from Ian Kemson, from Mike Montgomery, and also from Dale Marie Morgan, who is at a pokai. So we don't really need to move those, do we? Because it's just a workshop, but it's just an acknowledgement. All right, so our opening karakia is in our work pack here. So, takinga te marama ki a tātou, takinga te aroha ki a tātou, takinga te rangi maria ki a tātou, ko pirongia me te kawa, ko manga tautari, ko kakapuku ngā mauna, ko waikato, ko waipai ngā awa, tihei Māori oro. So let the light be called forth to shine upon us. Let love be called forth to rest among us. May peace be called forth to dwell between us. Our mountains Pirongia, Te Kawa, Maungatautari, Kakapuku, our rivers Waikato and Waipa. Behold the breath of life, which is the Tihei Māori ora bit. Right, kia ora koutou. Now, a little change to our morning program, and it's really because of there's quite a bit of staff sickness through the organisation, so we're sort of feeling for those people. So the Cambridge Connections workshop is going to be postponed until next week. So it really just leaves us with the elected members' expense rules and then the transition to recovery program briefing from Sally.
May I just ask a question?
Yes.
In terms of, and I think we all said that we had a few questions that weren't essentially urgent, but I think we said that we transmit those by email. Is that all right with you?
Yes, please. If you can collect them up and send them to Abby Reddy.
Abby,
who
right?
will collect them
No, that's
and
fine.
put them in front of the Cambridge Connections team. Thanks, Roger.
So does it mean Roger's going to collect them for all of us, and so there's one email, or we can?
No, you can just fire them to Abby.
Yeah.
She'll collect them. And would it be helpful then if we also circulate to you what all the questions were? So when we get answers to them, they're circulated to everybody.
Yeah, lovely.
Okay. I will sort that out as we speak.
All right, folks, so if we turn to page 30 of the 50, and the workshop elected members allowance and expenses policy, dated today, and I'll hand over to the wonderful Jo Greaves.
Thank you very much. So the purpose of the workshop here today is we're going to look at the elected member allowances and expense policy. We look to do a comprehensive review of that at least every triennium and then just make any changes as we need to the rest of the time. So we've done we've conducted that comprehensive review, and that's included kind of looking not only really at the structure, which is why you see that you've got quite a different looking document, but also the component parts we've gone through. And so just a bit of background in terms of the policy. So it sets the allowances payable to elected members and it regulates elected members' sensitive expenditure. So it's got two purposes there. And so what we need to be cognizant of when we're developing the policy is making sure that we're complying with the determination order, which is issued by the Remuneration Authority. They generally do, we have one that applies from the 1st of July each year, which is their comprehensive one that they issue annually, and then throughout the year as amendments happen with different councils changing maybe some of their remuneration structure, they issue amendments. So we've got to make sure that any allowances that we pay fall within the realms of that determination order that they issue. So we've got to make sure that any allowances and expenses subject to standards of probity and financial prudence expected of a public entity and able to withstand public scrutiny. So just in terms of that determination order, they set a number of allowances that we can pay. So there's the vehicle kilometre allowance, and you will have seen with your change to your forms now that they actually have different rates of pay for different types of vehicles. So that's been a change that has happened over the last while to accommodate that. Travel time allowance, that's payable, and we're going to talk about that a bit later. ICT allowance, so that's that's allowances that we can pay for your computer, printer, phone and things like that. Childcare allowance, so that's where members might have to pay for the care of a child, and there's provision for that, and there's a new allowance that has come in last year for home security system, so we'll talk about that in detail. So I just want to kind of walk you through the changes in terms of the policy. So you will see what we had last time in our policy. It had quite different sections for all elected members, sections for the mayor, then sections for mayor and councillors. And so actually it ended up that there was quite a bit of repetition in the policy. So just in terms of streamlining it, the idea was to get rid of those different sections and put it all just under its topic headings, just to make it more efficient and easier to read and go through, rather than having to jump to different parts depending on who you were. We've got in there a new definition of council business. So it's got, effectively, it's got a definition that council business means a number of different activities, and then it's got a list underneath to say council business does not include. I don't know if anyone, I think it would be quite good if anyone's got any feedback as we go through. Did anyone have any comments or feedback on that definition, or did that look about right to people? Right. So there's also a new definition in there of professional development course. So that means a conference, seminar, online webinar, or other training to develop individual elected members' knowledge and skills for their role as an elected member, just to add some clarity in that space. Yeah.
Thanks, Jo. The question I had was about the submitting within 60 days of expenditure. Yeah, because I'm finding it really difficult to do that. Like at the moment, there doesn't seem to be a time limit. Do I have to get my mileage claim in before this gets adopted? I'm just checking. Or will you take a lenient approach? It's not going to, yeah.
We can, and it's and I suppose that's one of the things that it would be good to, you know, discuss today as to whether 60 days seems like you can achieve that. I think one of the purpose of putting that provision in there was to try and make sure that as much as possible, when we've got expenditure occurring, that we're making sure it's in the financial year that it was incurred. And so that was the driver for the 60 days and try and set some framework around there. But if that's people don't think that's achievable, or we can look at different timeframes.
I think if there's a target, so we know when we're supposed to do it, and maybe if there is some leeway if you don't quite reach it. I can appreciate you wanting to certainly get the claims paid within the financial year. And for me, it's mostly mileage. Yeah. I guess another thing that would be really helpful is to be really clear when it's the best time, you know, like to get it in by a certain time or date so that it's can be processed in time for the next pay round or something. Well, actually saying that, I was sort of trained how to do this when we had a monthly pay cycle, but of course that's different now. So yeah, because there was no information about, you know, when you should be trying to get these submitted by, you know, whether it used to be like the last council meeting of the month or by the 8th of the month or something, you know, something like that. Yeah.
So we did have it like when we were on monthly meetings, try and get it in by the SPMP meeting, which used to be the first meeting of the month, but it might be quite good just in terms of having an easy date to remember. It could well be that we, you know, try for a target date of the state at the start of the month, the first meeting of the month, because I know a number of you actually hand the forms in, so it's quite good to have it linked with a meeting. But now we also have the fortnightly pay, so we can kind of process them on a different cycle because those claims get actually paid when you get your enumeration. So, yeah.
So just to clarify, where do we get to with the 2-month thing after that? I mean, within the financial year, I think makes perfect sense. I mean, I remember putting a claim in and thought this must be a real pain because it's out of sequence for the financial years. I think that needs to be a line in the sand. But even that, we need a date because June the 30th, it may be your date, but James will give us some indication on that.
Yeah, can I just ask James, because I think the end of the financial year would be the absolute maximum, but we've still got to run the books and keep the financial cycles ticking over. So James, what's that mean for you in terms of the optimum? If we give councillors a date by which each month they need to be submitted, you've got 60 days.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that I've just also noted too, it's not just a financial cycle thing too, is if people leave it too long, they forget about the circumstances of the travel and it becomes quite administratively difficult retrospectively to figure things out. And I say that in the nicest possible way because I'm likely to do that myself. So I think it's just kind of working out one that just keeps on top of it without it being too onerous. So James, have you got any comments?
Yeah, I mean, the critical thing is if you're sitting on some large expenses, if you send us through an email letting us know what the approximate value is, we can accrue them for year end, so we can recognise them in the current year. Obviously, we'd like to get them paid as soon as we can, but if it's a few $100s or a couple $100s, it's okay. But I think the 60 days is a good guideline. Obviously, there will always be exceptions to everything. But I think it's just good practice because we have a similar practice with our own stuff. So in terms of their credit cards, we have to reconcile them every month, pay off and so I just think it'd be good practice. I agree with our chief executive as well, because I'm really guilty of this as well, I call it shoebox accounting. That's where you just throw everything in a shoebox or your glove box and then you sit and go, what was that for? So it's just to maximise your own out-of-pocket expenditure for business expenses. I'd actually recommend you do it monthly, personally. Just sit and find an hour every month. It makes it so much easier. It's just my personal view. As I said, if you get to the end of the year, we do hold the budget in that year. If you could send us through, if it's going to be quite material, if something's happened, you've been on some flights and it's related to 20th of June or something, if you want to flip us through a mail, we'll accrue it and then we'll release it when you put your invoice again. So is that helpful?
That's helpful. So we'll stick to the 2 months, but there is a bit of flexibility. It's a procedure more than a policy. Liz, did you have something? No, done, answered.
I've got a note just to make sure we kind of reflect that in the drafting, so I'll incorporate that. So we've also gone through and we've made some changes just in terms of your rules and your approvers. So you've now got James here as CFO rather than Group Manager Business Support, because that, yeah.
Look, the reason we've done this is because at the moment, if the approval goes to Carol for the mayor, Carol, the president, comes to me to then approve it again. So I think I have oversight of the budgets and what's there, and Joe works down the hall for me. So I think it just makes good common sense to maybe on some things cut Carol out of the loop because it could be quite small items. So.
Yeah, so it's just for the mayor that's the chair of risk and assurance.
Yeah.
So for the councillors, it will be you and the
that's right.
mayor.
Yeah. So it's been expanded.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the approval process there, and we will also provided just in terms of the mayor's claims, just an alternate if the chair of the Risk and Assurance Committee was not available, which we didn't have in the last rules. So we'll just go over now to, unless anyone's got any questions, if we'll go to on anything else, if I look at the travel.
Sorry, Joe, the only thing I picked up on that is the alternate was any 2 members of the Risk and Assurance. Would that not naturally step to deputy chair and one other member? I just thought hierarchy wise, that whole one step up, it just makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Mm.
So just looking at your travel and professional development approvals, in that section. So just to note in terms of professional development plans, they were removed at December last year because we're looking at a change and looking at kind of how your professional development can work and looking at a wider training and development program for the triennium, which would sit outside this policy, which is why those type of things have been removed and they will be captured elsewhere. So, in terms of your training and professional development approvals, that looks quite like different from your current rules, but the principles are the same. So it's about making sure we're capturing those necessary approvals if you're going on a professional development course, or you've got air travel or overnight travel for council business, and for membership fees. So those are really what we're looking for. The policy to capture in terms of getting the necessary approvals. It's, you know, it's not about if you're somewhere and it's a parking ticket. So we just wanted to make sure we've got that clear in terms of structure and those clarities around those approvals that are required. So you'll see in the way it's structured. So this is when you need approvals, and then we've got a paragraph 20, there's exceptions to that. And so we've got a new provision in there which kind of clarifies what happens when you've got group training. So if it's councillor training, then that's approval from the mayor and the CFO. And if it's community board training, then that group training, then that approval will come from the relevant chair and the CFO. So setting that out. And we needed to have something that we could deal with that training that happens really in that first 2 months of the election, because that's quite a different time. You know, you've got the mayor-elect and things that need to be booked in. So it just in terms of approval processes for that, the best way forward we thought was to have that sitting with the chief executive during that interim period, just because of practicalities for that. So make sure that that's all in place. We have got though for the community board, just because they run a little bit different in terms of their training. So if they've got any induction training that might run past that 2 months, that also sits with the CE in terms of approvals. So that's really kind of your main changes to your approvals for training and professional development. Any questions, or does that all seem okay?
Just on that, going down, only mayor's flight booked as flexi fares. Look, that there is it's a bit impractical. I mean, though I'm only new to this, at least Joe and myself, and actually I think Steph, well, we different flights last time, but we actually use that flexi fare thing. Now, the alternative is I get a flexi fare. I normally pick up Joe, or I'll pick up whoever if I can, to save on taxis and all the rest of it. We get different flights. You're up for at least $80 back to Cambridge. So I just think that we just need to think about that, because these things finish and, mate, you're straight on the phone trying to get an earlier flight. Last thing you want to be stuck in Wellington, or I do anyway, though I do need to buy a hat. But it's normally getting on a flight and getting back to home. So I don't know how much extra they are, but I think we should at least put the deputy mayor or the alternate person who's going. Well, that's my view, but I'll take your thoughts on it.
I'm glad you raised it, because I've been in the victim of bad weather and different things that interrupt flights, and I guess I mean, obviously flexi fare is one way to handle it. Another way is to allow people to travel down the night before so that you don't get caught by fog and things like that. But is there sort of scope to allow that sort of, you're not just taking the cheapest flight or something, you're factoring in these things so that you can reliably get people to a conference or something?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that if I might, because also, you know, prior to COVID, the Air New Zealand schedule was really reliable and they had a lot more flights going out of regional centres, and it is a different kettle of fish now completely. There's so many cancellations, and then you add weather. So I support that. I think we need to support councillors in terms of taking a pragmatic approach still looking for affordability, but I think we've just got to take a pragmatic approach. Now, how much of that sits in here versus our procurement policy, I'm not sure, but if you give direction today around this, so it might be a consideration of fully flexi, we can come up with some wording, I think, that gets it. I would think at least the mayor and the deputy mayor need to fly fully flexi, but I do think in the current environment, it's useful to book fully flexi. I don't know now that it's going to drive the cost savings that it might have once, because the cost involved, and not just financial cost, but time and stress of being somewhere and being stuck and not being able to change your flights, and then being at the whim, and then having to find accommodation at the last minute or a rental car, that all adds cost into it. And it does happen on a regular basis now. So I think we need to relook at that, team.
Yeah, actually, having just listened, I tend to agree with the councillors on this, and I would actually change that to include the mayor and deputy mayor, and where it makes sense, where it makes practical business sense, where there's a practical business reason behind it, approval by the mayor. For other councillors.
Could we also have a look at our procurement processes in terms of that ability to fly the night before and stay in accommodation? Because I'm not sure what our processes are for that at the moment. James, it'd be good to have a look at that.
It's just in terms of a practical solution to that. It is, we have a form where people put in their preferred time of travel. So, you know, so you can, when you're filling in your professional development thing and you're going down or you're booking your course, and there is concern about you not being able to get out or back, you just put in the date before. So that's a simple workaround, and that's what I think people do. And often, because, you know, if you've got things starting at 8:30 or 9 in Wellington, you actually need to be there at the start time. So you need to be able to make sure that the date that you're asking to travel is going to comfortably get you to where you need to go on time with traffic and everything else. So that's easy to just put that other date.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is the business purpose determines what the mechanism is for going, right? And if it's outside of the standard, it just needs approval.
Yeah, and that'll be something that, you know, if you've put the day before, when it goes to the mayor and the CFO to approve, they'll see that it's day before, they'll see that the course is on there. And so it's just about putting a bit of narrative in the form to explain the course starts at 8:30. I want to make sure I'm comfortably there. It's really important I'm there for the start. So this is why I'm going down the night before. James will see that. The mayor will see that and approve it or not. So it'll be part of the approval process.
Can I ask a question about the insurance though, if flights are disrupted? Yeah, so I mean, because we do have travel insurance for these events, but would it be such that the effort of making a claim and things like that, it's much better just to have the flexi fare, isn't it? No?
I think those are all really good points. I think we just need to just go away and bring those points together and have a look at our current travel process, including looking at our insurance provisions, and make sure it's still fit for purpose.
Dean.
Yeah, I just had a question. We're talking about flexi fares, but there's two types. So we're talking about both types or just about the flexi time fare? Because the flexi time fare is about twice the price of a standard ticket. But if you get a flexi refund ticket, you can be 6 or 7 times the price, which makes it fairly expensive.
The cheaper one.
Yeah.
Right, on the mayor's instruction, we'll take that away and we'll have a look at it. We'll come back to you. For the purposes of this, then can I just, because Joe, you're looking for sign off on this today, aren't you? So
the purpose of this is just a
Just a
workshop
workshop?
to get your
Okay.
feedback, and then it'll be going to finance and corporate on the
Okay.
25th.
So we'll reword that point subject to what we find in terms of pulling this together and having a think about it when it comes back. Yep. 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 That we wouldn't do that in the policy, but that would be part of the process and behind the policy. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, just something, can you make it a bit clearer, new approvals for training within 2 months of election? What I mean, something like AI comes up after that, 2 months of the election.
Yeah, and that would be when, after the 2 month period, that's when the normal approval process would would kick in. So if it was individual training, it would be the mayor and CFO approving it for a councillor, and if it was group training, it would be the mayor. So it's just that 2-month period is allowing for that interim one where often you may have to make certain bookings for things before the elections actually happened, because you need to kind of book in trainers or book courses or things like that, and you've got that period where the mayor can't act because they're the mayor-elect. So it just kind of covers that interim period, and then your normal approval process applies.
It's just continuity of business. It's just to make it easy.
Right. So then just a note, we've just included in there what is different from the last one with specific approvers for accompanying spouses where that happens. So the process for travel and expenses is pretty much the same apart from those changes we've talked about. We did remove the reporting requirement after attending training from the rules. That wasn't something that was happening, and now you don't actually have information only reports on your agendas. So it's about probably finding, I think, a different mechanism for sharing that information when people are going on training courses, and maybe that's in more of an informal environment that you make sure that you're sharing that knowledge. So then what we've got, the mileage allowances in there, we've just created that, so that's just a bit more directly linked with what's in the determination order, as opposed to pulling some of those provisions through into our policy itself. Anything that needs to be captured, we'll make sure that you need to be aware of, we'll make sure that's captured on the form as we do for the different vehicle types. What we have done in here in these rules here is in the new policy is remove the travel allowance. This is not something that has really been claimed before, and it has such as one we're not really included in our made budgetary provision for, because we don't want to make budgetary provision for something that's not claimed. So it's not something that's used. So we've just removed it. If that's all, we're proposing to remove it. Anyone's got any feedback on that? That sounds all okay. So now we'll just have a look at the home security allowance, which is a new one that the Remuneration Authority introduced last year. So that's at paragraph 52, that starts of your policy. We have it applying to all elected members, so that's mayor, councillors and community board members. One of the provisions that is in that determination order that we talked about before that sets the framework that we must comply with is that you must live in the district. And so those that live outside the district can't apply. So there's a provision in there. So it's got a stepped process at paragraph 54. So effectively the elected member writes to the mayor outlining any potential or actual risks and threats. And then if the mayor is happy with that, then he authorises that security threat and risk assessment. And then if the mayor is happy with the findings of that assessment, then the reimbursement is approved. So the mayor will also approve, it's proposed the mayor also approves the person undertaking that assessment. So that could either be internal or external. And the payments are up to $4,500 for installation, and then there's an ongoing $1,000 for monitoring call-outs and repairs. So that's been set at the levels that are in the determination order now. If it was the mayor, then this would be CE approving it. Has anyone got?
I'd like to ask a question about must live in the district. So if you're an elected member and you are experiencing security threats because of your elected member role in Waipa district, why would you be denied being able to get a security system simply because you don't actually live in the district? Was there any reasoning or
No, I'm not sure, but
It's actually
it
part of the
does.
determination
It
order,
says
isn't
based
it?
on a security and risk assessment authorised by the local authority, a local authority may reimburse the expenses of having a security system installed and monitored at a member's primary place of residence within the local authority area. So it's really specific. So because we must comply with that framework, if you, I mean, you don't have to have this allowance in your policy at all. It's optional, it's discretionary, but if you do want it, it's really important and we must comply with what is in the determination order in terms of that framework.
Yeah, so there's no flexibility for us to ignore what's in the determination order and say, well, all of our elected members, regardless of where they live, would qualify. All we can do is decide whether or not we're going to have the policy or not have the policy. Yeah. I mean, I certainly support having the policy. Yeah, I think it's needed.
Yeah, so we can't even make any other submissions to the determination? Is it worth putting something forward? Because it sounds to me in their wording, what they mean is you can't have a security system at your house and then another one at your back because they're annoying you everywhere you go. But I'm wondering if they're thinking just because you are elected in the community that you therefore live there, when that doesn't have to be the case. That's how it sounds. It sounds like your primary residence, meaning the place where you live, and they're assuming that it's in the district. Yeah, and I mean, it's not the requirement anyway, as we know, but are we allowed to ask them what they actually intend by that?
I mean, certainly in terms of the remuneration authority, it certainly can provide, you know, feedback and thoughts and questions and suggestions. It's obviously we need to work with what's in place now, but they do not only do that, you know, they update this annually and then they do amendments throughout the year. But so I mean, certainly it is. If you want to, that's definitely an option of contacting them and just providing some feedback, but it just doesn't change.
I'd support just taking out the bit about in the district, the primary residence. Seems to make sense to me.
Joe, what flexibility have we got to make a determination of our own? We'd like some legal advice. You don't have to give that to us now. If there's no flexibility to determine where a standing member has got a primary residence outside of the district, what is the risk to council of still providing this benefit or this allowance for that standing member? And if not, can we please contact the Remuneration Authority and get some direction on it? Because I'm with Shane, Dean. That I think we need to think about this from a very pragmatic perspective, and the intent, what's the intention of the policy is important to understand. So if you like, Mike, we can take some direction on that one. Thanks, Joe.
Happy with that? Cool.
Has anyone else got any questions about any other parts of that allowance? No. So
Actually, I've just got one question. And it's like, there's a lot of, this all hinges on the mayor, right? And the mayor, whoever they are, is going to have their thoughts on this. So where can it go if there's a dispute? Where can it go?
we have got in the provisions that it currently it is the mayor's approval that is required. It's a bit like any training. There's no, a councillor might, if you refuse training, a councillor might disagree with that, and or any of the other things that you as mayor give approval for. We haven't kind of made provision for any kind of dispute provisions in there. The final approval does sit with the mayor, but that, there is a number of things that authority rests with.
Yeah, the other thing to consider, Mayor Mike, is our audit process. If we have a policy that we have to comply with, and that's.
I understand that.
So as this, if this is something you want to include, we will have to make budgetary provision for that. So it will be an additional cost.
Well, let's come down to that because so the budgetary amount would be members times $5,500. How would you work the budget?
Well, I think we would have to, particularly in the early stages, make some estimations on how many people we thought might claim and keep a close eye on the budget. So it's obviously not something that potentially that, you would think that everyone's going to want to claim. So, we might pick out a number like maybe 3 a year, but then have to keep a really close eye on what transpires.
Can I just say that this is a directive from Remuneration Authority. Mike, I think you just need to, have confidence that there is sufficient budget for flexibility around these things. Obviously, for the coming financial years, we will have an allocated budget for it. But Joe, I think what we'll do is look for people, any councillors that put their hand up to say, look, I think I'd like to apply for this for these reasons, the conversation with the mayor, and we'll just track that budget. But you can be confident that we can manage that with an existing OPEX budgets. Yeah, and I don't know of a council yet where every single council member has got security cameras. Some of them are probably getting quite close given recent years, but I think that we can take a pragmatic approach to this and be clear that we'll find the OPEX budget.
Thanks for that.
Would it be helpful, Mike, do you think, to have myself or an alternate member work alongside you, or in future terms, having 2 people so you have 2 sets of eyes on perhaps the claims and then a little bit more
Yeah,
reassurance in our audit process?
I hear that, Joe. I don't know if 2 works because what if it's 1 all? I mean, it really gets down to the framing of the rationale for having it. Like you sit here and think it's nothing, but actually my view of the world might be quite different to yours. I'm a guy, I'm not a female or whatever else, sort of thing. So it's just that whole world view, and it's just a lot of actually, this is not like approving PD budget for me. I mean, maybe I'm reading more into it. I mean, I've got no issue with it at all, but I just don't want it to cause issues if actually, I mean, I guess we'll take the safest route possible as long as it's sensible. The application is sensible. It's not just, I want a security thing and the council's going to pay for it. I'm just flagging that this current mayor, that wouldn't work. So the rationale or the business case for it, put it forward. It makes sense. No issue. Just want to just upfront it.
And we can certainly make sure that if you've got applications, that if you feel that you need any other advice from anyone in particular, be that internal or external, that we can make sure that you've got that before you need to make that decision. So that can be supported.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jane.
So this is we should just move on to the childcare allowance there. This is an allowance that you've currently got in your policy. It is set at, in the current one, of up to $6,000 per financial year for every elected member. It is designed for those children you have day-to-day responsibility for, and we have required a tax invoice in the current policy. In the drafting that we've got in your new one, we have changed that requirement for a tax invoice to satisfactory evidence of the amount paid, just to make that a bit easier for you, recognising that sometimes when you're getting childcare, not necessarily everyone that will be providing that is in a position to be able to provide a tax invoice, because it could be a high school student or an older child. But one of the things would like some feedback in there is actually that the determination order, the levels have now increased, so that actually there is the ability to include in there up to 7,500 per child per financial year, if you are minded to increase that.
Can I just please? So I guess, and it's probably clear from the policy, But these have been determined by the Remuneration Authority to try and attract a variety of people, to get diversity of people standing in local government. And we know that's been a real challenge across the sector. And so all of these allowances, that's what their intention is to try and do, is to be able to provide for the living and life circumstances of different people, to try and attract that. And we know the hours you work, I mean, I talk about it all the time, that for most of you, by the time you finish your year, you're working for less than the minimum wage in terms of the hours worked versus your remuneration. And so these small amounts of money can go a long way to helping people with young families, or responsibilities for grandchildren even, which is happening more and more often. So it is about that. That's the intention, as I'm sure you've picked up. Thanks, Mike.
All good with that? Good.
So you'd support increasing it? Yeah. Right. So that's just in terms of next. Did anyone else have anything else that they'd picked up in the policy? Any other sections that I've not covered that I'd like to talk about?
In terms of the policy, no issues whatsoever. But just in terms of an opportunity, it's a very manual system that we have. I was involved in a huge organisation called the Te Aomori Business Chamber. And what we did, we have software called Zero Me, and we take a photo of the receipt and it does all the work. It works out where it was, puts it in, and I push a button and it goes somewhere, right? So the software is available, and I just think we need to look at that as an opportunity in terms of efficiency, because it's already there.
Yeah,
Yeah, Shane.
we are very conscious that it's a manual process, and we have had some kind of workings been going on in the background that we've been trying to kind of look at electronic forms and how we can make it easier for you. So that's been an ongoing thing that we're trying to kind of pull together and make things easier. Yeah.
Just in the definitions on the council does not include events where the primary focus is social activity. I just wonder how that affects something like us going to markets as a group.
If you're going there for the purpose of talking to your constituents, that wouldn't be a social activity, because that's about you going out there and collecting community views, which is really important information for you to have when you're coming back around this table.
So the litmus test would be take the flag, because that's just a good way of black and white. No, take the Waipa flag, then you're open for business, so to speak, open to engage. I think that would be an easy way through that to get rid of any muddy waters.
I mean, the key thing in our staff-sensitive expenditure policy in this one is there justifiable business purposes, and is it part of what you do? So if you just think of those two things. Yeah.
Which totally fits into one of our key priorities, is engaging with our public. So, yeah. And look, a few of us did that teardrop flag thing, and it definitely brings people in.
Great. If that's no other questions, got some great feedback, and we'll be incorporating that, and we'll be back in front of you with this on the 25th of March at Finance and Corporate.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for your feedback, everyone. Very good. All righty. So we're going to clear away now for the Transition to Recovery Program briefing by Sally and Wayne. And this is to do with the recent weather events. So just confirming before we start, there are no papers for this, but it is up on the screen.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for your time this morning for us to provide an update on where we're at following the severe weather event that happened in February. Just noting that for our communities that have been impacted, it's coming up this Friday has been a month since the weather event. So I think for some that will be feeling like a very long time, and for others like us who have been in the response and recovery, that's disappeared very quickly. So just recognising the impact that this has had on our community. So in terms of today, what I want to do is provide an update on recovery following the February severe weather event. The purpose of this session is to walk through what we currently know, so what our current snapshot is, explain what transition means and the work we're setting up for the recovery phase. The intention is to give you an understanding of how recovery works, recognising that for Waipa and Otorohanga and other districts around New Zealand at the moment, this is the first time we've been in recovery. So it is a learning process for not only us, but our communities as well. What our areas of priority are, where you as governors will be involved, and really important to provide that oversight as well, and as well as providing information to us in the Recovery Office, visibility of risk and future decision making. So throughout my short slides that I've got today are actual photos of what's happened on the ground. And you'll notice that this one is Te Tahi in terms of the reservoir and that erosion that happened on the side of that reservoir. So if you don't know where these photos are from, I'll try and remind myself to show and tell you as well. So in terms of our two districts, so Otorohanga and Waipa, the impacts were wide-ranging. These included impacts to homes, roads and bridges, rural operations in terms of on-farm and for lifestyle block owners, our water network, access to services, cultural sites and the natural environment. At the peak of the response across our districts, we had over 135 people displaced. We had over 23 roads closed, 3 state highways impacted, waterways reformed, significant land subsidence and multiple farms with limited access across the 2 districts. So for us in terms of Waipa, I think one of the larger events that we've had for some time that's really impacted pockets of our community, but across our whole community as well. Some of the impacts resolved quickly through the response phase, and that's what response is about. It happens really quickly. Things are changing by the minute and the hour, while others will take longer to address through this recovery phase that we're now in. The information that I've shown on this slide is a current snapshot for Waipa. So the figures we're saying it was a 1 in 250 year flood event. The amount of water that fell on Parongia, on the Monga, is significant, and some of the photos that you'll see will show that volume of water that came down on that Friday evening. We still have State Highway 39 closed, and we're hoping to get some news that that will be imminent in terms of that temporary fix opening very soon. We've got limited access still for some residents on their roads, and that will be the medium to long-term fix that we need to look at. We've got infrastructure that's still being monitored, assessing the impact on our rural community has been significant in terms of their actual farm accesses on farm, as well as there was disruption to production at times. We know that our businesses in Parongia have been impacted, especially around that State Highway 39 closure and that the movement of people through there. Biggest impact also in our natural environment, including our parks, have been quite affected in Parongia, and we've also are aware of cultural sites impacted. So the role of recovery is to bring together the known impacts, understand what this picture looks like, identify actions to support our communities to recover back to the new normal. So we know that things may not be the same, but what is that new normal for them? So this photo here is actually the area that has been de-watered, de-sludged, de-cleared behind Corcoran Road. So That is from earlier this week, the latest photo of what was happening at Corcoran Road there.
Just like to just quickly comment on the response side of things, because the snapshot's up there. Look, it was an unprecedented event for Waipa. It showed the strength of the Western Waikato councils coming together and formulating an EOC. It involved at least 11 days, 6 nights, 3 24-hour sessions in the EOC. It involved 164 individual councils, individual council staff, and 12 councils, including Taranaki emergency management staff, working across a whole range of agencies, government agencies, emergency services and police, Māori wardens, iwi, FENS, GMO. There was a whole lot of people that came together to ensure a response that was required to protect life and property. And we evacuated a number of properties, including Cochrane Road. So, extensive state of emergency, which was extended period, and now we're in a notice of transition period. So just highlight that.
So as I click to the next slide, Zoe's most probably going to need to help me with this one. So it is a snapshot that we've received from Waikato Regional Council, and the slide itself is an overview of an aerial photograph in January, on the January 29th, to an aerial photograph of the 22nd of February. And it's of Mangati Road, which is Ormsby Road, State Highway 39. So this just gives you a snapshot of the water that obviously came down from the Monga. So just wanted to, but I might need to ask for Zoe to help me here. So you can see there just the difference in terms of the waterway that's opened up. I might get you to play it again because it does happen quite quickly. And so you can see the volume that came down and impacted that State Highway 39 bridge there. We are getting information like this through working with Waikato Regional Council as they go out. So these are things that we would like to share that just shows you what happened on that day. Thank you, Zoe. And these also in terms of the impacts that we've had in Waipa. So we've obviously got bridge works happening in the middle there. That is Manguka Bridge, and I think that is now reopened for traffic at limited speed restrictions. Batauri Road is on the left-hand side, and that has now got the Bailey Bridge that was installed fairly quickly around that. And the photo there on the right is actually up in our Parongia Forest block. And the rock in the middle actually has somebody standing on top of it. So it shows you the scale of the rock and the debris that came down off the Monga on the day. These weren't previously exposed, and that would have been a relatively small water tributary prior to the 13th of February. So just showing you in terms of the scale, and I don't, from what I understand, the pictures do not give it justice as what's happened on the ground. So in terms of where we're at the moment, transition to recovery was signed by Mike on at 12 p.m. on the 25th of February. The transition allows EOC activities to continue through into recovery. So essentially what that means is that Wayne was obviously one of the controllers during response. He had powers that he could utilise during that period. The transition process allows those powers to come to myself as your local recovery manager. So it is actually quite important for us to be in this transition period while we're still understanding what is happening on the ground, while we're still understanding what the impacts are for our communities. Because if we just didn't have those powers, then it would mean that we wouldn't be able to restrict access into unsafe areas, directing or undertaking works required for recovery, and managing dangerous structures or places. The only thing that doesn't transition from response to recovery is the ability for me to commandeer equipment. Not quite sure why that hasn't happened, but anyway, we don't have those powers, but essentially is a really important process for the transition period. This is also an important legal and operational bridge between response and recovery, but it does not define the full duration of recovery. So we have a 28 day period that the transition period is. This can be extended, and our 28 days is until the 25th of March. So there will be a process that we will go through to relook at where we're sitting on whether or not we extend that or whether or not we transition to recovery. So those are things that are on our timeline at the moment. So recovery is very different to response. It's slower, it can be very painfully slow at times, and that can be, we can all feel that. It requires clearer sequencing of work and coordination, but it still requires strong communication and everybody to be working together to achieve those outcomes, those same outcomes together.
I'll just comment. So it's really important that we've done a transition from response to recovery, because there are certain powers and authorities that Sally's talking about that are needed. For example, EL's team, for example, will need to apply for resource consents works that have been undertaken for emergency works that would have normally required resource consents, maybe with the regional council. You don't need to apply for those resource consents until a 60 working day period once you've notified the regional council. So it gives you those flexibilities in terms of and those powers to carry on doing those works even in a transition period, such as fixing Corcoran Road up without having the resource consent. You can apply for those later down the track. So it's really important for that. And also, I'll just highlight that we didn't designate any building areas in Waipa because we didn't have any placard areas. Any buildings that were placarded were mainly in Otorohanga. So Otorohanga did designate building areas, but in terms of Waipa, we didn't need to do that in terms of the transition into recovery.
Thanks, Wayne, and that's a great segue in terms of my next slide. So in terms of our approach, what is recovery? So it's a coordinated collaborative program of work to bring about immediate, medium-term and long-term recovery and resilient outcomes for our communities following the event. It is set up differently to the EOC, and it covers these 4 areas that we are up on the slide for you. So in terms of our community environment, these are the issues around people and their lived experience of recovery. And one of the things that I've talked to Claire about is around those psychosocial impacts. And while people is the adrenaline of the event and then working through that, longer term, those can come out in different ways and at different times. So it's really important that we are able to wrap around, provide support and enable community connection post it as part of the recovery itself. And it's also around that prolonged uncertainty. So if you're continually looking at piles of debris, or you're driving on a road that wasn't like it was before, it's that continual reminder. It's rain coming as well. What does the next lot of rain mean? So it's about how do we support our communities in this area. And it's also around our rural communities. They have a lot of cleanup to do. It's around that fatigue, around that isolation, and really understanding the quantum of damage. So talking to rural support, like I think on farm and on lifestyle, you get out and you do what you need to do. But when that quantum starts to build up over time, it starts to impact you more, or the reality of it impacts you more. We're also impacts for marae, urapa and cultural sites. So need to understand this information, need to look at how we can support in that space. And a key area for our community, as you're all aware of, is the Mural Relief Fund. And that's one of our practical tools available to help where there is genuine hardship being experienced by our communities. The other area is our economic environment, and recognising the businesses and the rural productivity that have been impacted. It's how do we understand what their needs are, who do we need to connect them with, and how do we support those connections. And it's also known long-term how we're building back as well. So how does that support that long-term view? In the built and infrastructure environment, essentially that's the biggest component for us as council. So we're talking about our roads, we're talking about the water, the stormwater assets, our waste. Waste disposal is also quite a big aspect of this, as well as our forestry on Parongia. So our infrastructure can affect access, daily life and economic activity. So it's what are we doing and what's that picture look like to build back? And that's some of the discussions that we'll need to bring back to you to have those conversations. They also feed into the annual plan and the LTP process as well. So those are the connects that we need to bring back to you. And in our natural environment, we're working very closely with Waikato Regional Council. Their first priority has been around cleaning debris out of waterways that impacted infrastructure or could impact infrastructure. Once they've worked through that, they then will look at the wider view. So working closely with them. So they're, key issues around sediment and debris, waterway impacts, land stability, and there has been still land movement happening, as well as what we're calling our social infrastructure in this space, which is our parks and reserves, and knowing that a lot of Parongia has been impacted for Department of Conservation as well. King.
Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Sally and Wayne. Just in terms of the built infrastructure and obviously the Three Waters infrastructure that we're currently looking to transfer, how big of a challenge is that in terms of the assessment and the condition and possibly future reinstatement cost as part of that transfer agreement?
So that is all part of the information that we need to pull together to gain that assessment of costs, and working very closely with Waikato Waters Limited on what that would mean. This is information that we will need to bring back to you, and I think there'll be various components of what we bring back to council, whether it's from a roading perspective, whether it's from a waters perspective, or whether it's from our other aspects in terms of catchment management, etc. Eva Lisa is here, so if she wants to add anything more, I'm happy for her to jump to a microphone.
So in terms of the impact, it has been significant, as we're all aware, and our team have been working really hard in response to ensure a resilient supply, particularly to Parongia and the community, who have done really well to conserve water at this particular moment in time, as has the Waipa district. We're working really closely with George and Kevin in terms of pulling together the information required for the transition documents and working with Waikato Waters Limited. It's really complex because it's not just about damage, it's actually about the resilience we have now needed to input into our water supply network to make sure that our supply can continue. So it's not as simple, so we have a treatment plant and reservoirs and bores and pipes. So the team are now working on that portion of, I guess, the network and the information to provide to Sally for the recovery team and for elected members to be aware of.
Is there a level of risk, that the depth of this work that needs to be done? And I can appreciate that it's going to be quite complicated, and it's not just about repair or current state, it's about future risk, etc. Has that got a risk in itself in perhaps deferring the transition?
I don't, and I'm just signalling to Steph, I'm looking at Steph, the conversation around deferral of the transition, no. It is the complexity of an asset and how that is to be transferred once the assessments have been completed.
Sorry, Steph, you may want to sort of comment on this, but under the transfer agreement, if we were to hand over what I would call impaired assets, and the impairment cost, does that stay with us as a sort of almost a contingent liability? Or does the impaired asset go across with the new entity taking responsibility for it being not impaired?
My understanding at this point is the impaired asset goes across along with any insurance that is there fit to remedy the asset. And that's why, to EL's point, there needs to be really careful consideration given to not just a straight rebuild of the asset, but actually what that means in terms of the Waikato Water strategy. And just be aware, it's unlikely that ours will be the only asset that would go across. It's an impaired state. There's been weather events right across nearly every council involved in Waikato Waters. And this is a big asset. It's going to require a significant rethink in terms of a sustainable supply for the Pirongia village. And so, but the associated revenue, which in this case, I mean, I don't know if insurance counts as revenue, James, but in this case, the insurance claim would go with the asset.
Sort of, transferring the impaired asset, but if the asset then needs to be re-strengthened around a resilience, once again, where does that liability sit?
So the requirement to provide water supply to those people will sit with Waikato Waters Limited.
I think the people that would work on this are also transferring. So if the asset doesn't, so ipso de facto, and this question was asked in the transfer session that we had, and I think it was you, Councillor Gordon, that asked a specific question, and Carl confirmed that it would transfer over, because you asked specifically about impaired assets.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Sally, I'm going to take a different approach. It's more, the impacts for the western side of Waipa, where, that's my constituency. And I just want to give a huge shout out to the Emergency Operations Centre for the way that, I was feeding information in, and it was really good to see that visible commitment to getting things resolved and action happening. Obviously, it couldn't happen immediately, but I think everyone appreciated the efforts that were put in by those people that were at the centre. And those lines of communication are still open. You've made that clear, which is really great. And you've talked about the rural sector, those impacts are absolutely massive. And I don't want people to forget that, it's a month, but actually it's still very real for everyone that's living there. Yeah, and we're totally committed to trying to, get things happening so that cleanup is effective and things like that. And you've also highlighted that psychosocial impact. And I've had a good conversation with you this morning about those support hubs that are going to take that aspect into account, so that we are hoping that we'll have information on when they'll be set up, before too long. And I guess I want to move then to the economic and the Pirongia businesses, and then the huge work that was put in by the Waters team to make sure that the water services were maintained. Again, huge appreciation for that focus. It's just made so much difference that we, pretty much carry on at least our personal lives pretty much as normal. And I've really noted with the Pirongia businesses that there's been personal approaches made by those staff to make sure they're aware of what they can be claiming, applications they can be making and things like that. So that's good. We were just hanging out for that State Highway 39 to be opened, and someone put on Facebook page, I think we saw the building blocks going down the road, so it can't be long. And I think there's a big commitment to get those parks opened as soon as possible, as soon as those assessments are made that we know it's safe. That's what I've heard from the parks team, that as soon as we know that it's safe, at least those sections that are safe will be open. Is that correct?
So maybe if I just keep going through some of the stuff, and then I can come back and hopefully wrap up and answer some of your points that you've made. So if I just in terms of our approach in these four environments, what really underpins this is our connection with iwi and mana whenua as part of this process and working alongside us, which they really want to be involved in and do. It's our connection and coordination with our communities and agencies. And so that's part of the work that we've been talking about. Claire has been, connecting with MPI as an example, understanding where they're sitting around their classifications across New Zealand from that perspective. Communication is still critical in this process, and then also engagement. So on the ground engagement, understanding where the community's at, understanding what their needs are. And so that's a bit more of a different approach to what happens in response. Recovery we need to be more on the ground. And forgot to allude to that I've both got Gina, Julie and Anna in behind here listening today. Gina and Julie have been out and about within Parongia. They're looking at connecting with Whatari Road as well. So actually getting out, understanding what those communities are wanting. And we're also still connected, which is my next slide, with Aotearoa in terms of the work they're doing, because our communities share boundaries and they also utilise services in both of our districts as well. So one of the things just leading on from that is really you can also play an important role in helping ensure we maintain a strong picture of what our communities are experiencing. So if you're hearing anything emerging locally, please share that intelligence with us so that we can follow up and check in with people. And so we have set up a Waipa recovery at waipardc.govt.nz email address. So please feel free to use that and send information our way. As I alluded to, this is just a large diagram really that identifies the connectedness between Aotearoa and Waipa in terms of our recovery. We have set up offices in place for each district. So our Waipa Recovery Office is being set up across the road in Roche Street. From that perspective, critically, we will be setting up a governance for recovery, which will be made up of our mayors, our council CEs and iwi CEs as well. And so this will provide the strategic oversight of the recovery program and allow connection between both councils on shared priorities, major risks and cross-boundary issues and interests. We're currently developing what I'm calling a regular reporting dashboard. So that will be information that we will share with you, as well as out to our communities around what is happening in this space, how we're tracking. And we will also no doubt need to come back around this table once we build that view of what the costs look like, what our options are for those medium and long-term resolutions to our infrastructure that is damaged. That will come back around this table for decision making. So critically, we are working closely with iwi and mana whenua in place and coordinating our communities across the various agencies as required. We need to keep in line with the group, so that's the Waikato Group Emergency Management Team, as well as NEMA at central government. And as NEMA are the ones that will collate information to then feed in and talk to ministers about from a funding perspective. So we have to do weekly reporting to NEMA. We'll be doing more reporting to them around our situation when that information comes together. So in terms of our key risks of what we've talked about, something that feeds on from the response, capacity restraints. So that's just ensuring that we've got staff available to support recovery and that our partner agencies also have that staff available to us. The dependencies with partner agencies, and critically for us as two councils to still meet with them together, so we're not drawing on that resource. So that's something that both Gina and Julie are working in that space. Understanding our ongoing impacts on infrastructure, building that picture around cost, what our funding pressures are and opportunities. So insurance comes into that, NZTA subsidies come into that, but it's what other funding mechanisms are out there and how are we best prepared to enable us to access that and provide those information. And of course, really understanding our community needs and expectations by being in place and connecting with them to understand that. And in terms of next steps, so almost there, we're setting up the recovery office as I've talked about, so that will include our reporting cadence and connection. Critically, from a legislative requirement, we do need to develop a recovery action plan, and that will be very clear on what our actions are and the next steps for us to do. We need to be clear on understanding our costs and funding requirements, knowing that feeds into James's team work around annual plan and long-term plan, and it's really getting that picture for you as well. We're also developing some community barbecues over the next week in our affected areas, so we'll come back to you once we've got the details of that. And it's around assessing what our community needs long-term as those regular connections as well. So there is a bit on our plate at the moment, but very much take on board the thank you for those that have been involved to date. And there has been a lot of hours and a lot of work done by teams on the ground, by those in the emergency operating centre. But recovery doesn't finish as quick as that, and we're still here, and we've got some decisions for us as a council to make around those infrastructure impacts, but very much to keep connected with our community and understand their needs as well. So that is my update, and some pictures of massive pumps that we had in Corcoran Road. Thank you for your time, and happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Sally. Roger.
Good. I'm pleased you remembered. Could I ask you to flick back a couple of slides to the diagram, that one there? I really appreciate that when we had the state of emergency, it was a considerable combined operation with those agencies and districts that were involved. And I know that in terms of personnel, because we have a large number of our own Waipa personnel, perhaps that were leading the whole team. Now we're on recovery. How much of our resources are going to be applied into Otorohanga? I'm just concerned now on recovery, because we've really got a big job sufficiently to get ourselves back to recovery. And I'd like to see the majority of resources being applied in Waipa. Are we at risk of some being applied in Otorohanga?
So in terms of the Western Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Team, I will most probably hand over to Wayne on that, because I know Kathy is helping out, but her role is split across the three councils, so she is helping out from that perspective. The reason, one of the reasons why we've separated out the recovery office is to be present and in our location. So that's really critical for us. But we are trying to do this as lean and mean as we can do, to ensure that we're achieving what we need to do, but not drawing significant resource in that. So it's a fine balance. So at the moment, in terms of what we're doing in Waipa, it is staffed by Waipa staff, and what Otorohanga is doing is staffed by Otorohanga staff. Critically, though, there are key things that we can work on together that support that we're not duplicating things or doing things twice. So that's around connections with agencies, that we're doing that together. If there is updates from a iwi mana whenua perspective, we're doing that together, because their boundaries cross over our boundaries. If there's things from a roading perspective or a comms perspective that we can do and do jointly, we will do that together. So there is some joint work happening to save time and be efficient, but there's also our specific community needs that we need to manage as well. So it is a very different view to the EOC, and from that perspective. And Wayne, I don't know if you've got anything to add to, or Steph, from there.
Pretty much at the emergency operating centres, sort of, that's now finished. State of emergency is complete, even after the extension. So we're really in a recovery office. So in terms of shared personnel and the emergency side of things, no. There may be reviews undertaken that we may need to come together and discuss those in terms of any reviews of that response. But essentially, the state of emergency is now terminated, so there's no joint of council staff. But I guess I say again, in terms of the response, it was really important in terms of a number of staff, not only within the Western Waikato, but right across the Waikato region, came together in that response. It involved five controllers, as I say, 164-odd individual staff involving a range of councils throughout the Waikato that helped in that response. And it was important that happened because it was a 24-hour situation. We were running nights as well as days. So you can't just do that by one council. You have to have other councils to help. So, but back to your question, no more joint staff required for the EOC side of things.
Sorry, I wasn't referring back to the emergency response. I totally accepted that that was the best way that would happen. But in terms of recovery, we have a limited capacity, and it's the application of that capacity to Waipa that
It is, and also critically completing our recovery action plan will further define what that picture looks like as well. So those are the key sort of timeline things that we have to do. So thank you for that.
Right. Hey, look, just a massive thank you, as has been said, to everyone that has been involved from within these buildings, to staff that work outside them, to councils who have come and assisted, to the contractors, to the government, to NEMA, and everyone in between. Look, the times I went down to that EOC, I've written down some words: cooperation, commitment, communication, and control. And yes, there's always things in hindsight you can go, oh, I would have done that slightly different and all the rest of it. But when you're in it and what I saw, those sort of 4 words sum up what I saw. I'd also like to pick up, all the stuff that we, the hours, the days, the weeks, that have been over the last month, and the people from our organisation that have really made commitment, just dropped everything and jumped in without, I wouldn't have a clue how to pay or all the rest of it worked. People just got in and got stuck in and just didn't stop. And it was impressive from an organisational point of view. So I think that, the community, thank everyone for that. And look, and for our comms team, look, one thing, the tiny things we could do as elected members where it affected us, and admittedly it was on this more side this side of a district, was just try to be out and about and try and be a face. And people appreciated that, and the comms team that got in behind us and did the Facebook and the antenna and the websites. Look, the feedback, I'm sure, from all of us that went out there was massively appreciated too. So the work in the background, look, the impact, as you've alluded to, through the recovery piece, we don't know what it's going to look like. We know that there's multiple people that are going to pay for this, but we know at the end of the day, we're going to be paying for some of this. And so, look, just like to acknowledge around this table that there will be difficult conversations. We're expecting them. It will be very open with them, with the public, that you have an event like this, there is a cost to it. And you either have to pay for that or you stop doing something. Are the two most obvious things. So as a community, we just have to prepare ourselves. Like you say, it's not just the annual plan. It's not just in the next few months that this will affect us. It will be, medium term, which will lead into the LTP. So as elected members, we've discussed that. We're ready for that conversation, as I hope the community. And look, one of the things Mark Mitchell mentioned, I saw him on the radio, is about 3 weeks ago, 60% of the country was either in response or recovery. So it's no mean task for the government and NEMA and the agencies and the complexities of trying to get the resource and money. And I'm just thinking of a timing, and I don't know what that looks like, but when 60% of the country geographically are in that sort of in that state. I can only imagine things may take a little time. And look, just to Mark Mitchell and also back to Barbara Courager, both of them sort of fronted, and look, and Barbara came out to view one of the bridges, and she sort of said, as I think was put in the paper, that she'll go and knock on the doors of Parliament. And the next day we sort of got I think Barbara would have loved to say it was her, but she admitted maybe it wasn't. But, the intent there from those ministers and those MPs was actually to be of assistance. And that was also greatly appreciated. So, yeah, hey, we're not out of the woods yet. And those people on farms, you see those photos, that doesn't take weeks to clean up. And we totally understand those folks. And so I'm really pleased that the organisation is, in a very small way, trying to put those little community events on just to go and reconnect, listen to the stories, and again see how we can help. And that Merrill Fund is a small way of doing that. So thank you, Sally, to Wayne for your leadership down there too, and to Dave Symes, Dozer, for he was in the thick of it in the beginning there as well, and to all of our senior staff. Tier 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know how many tiers we've got in this organisation, but a lot of people put their hands up. So thank you. Right, we'll finish with the karakia, which we have on page 50 of 50. So piratia te rangamarie, piratia te aroha, piratia te ngākau pai, piratia ngā wāwata, kia kore e ngaro, homie hui tākie. So hold fast to peace, hold fast to love, hold fast to sincerity, hold fast to our hopes. May these things never be lost. Join us in unity. It is done. Pomotu ka pai, mā te wā.